can't believe I'm 3 months away from my mid-candidature review. I started my PhD back in July 2020, and the whole thing has flown by in one big blur. It has its ups and downs, although ever since my confirmation milestone, and when I was so burnt out I ended up in hospital at the end of last year, it's mostly been downs. But now that my fieldwork is on the horizon, I finally found my love for my project again, and I intend to ride this wave as long as possible. My research is within the broad field of theory and practice known as ICT for D, Information and Communications Technologies for Development. My actual research draws mostly upon sociology and development, but with a huge philosophical aspect to it. So recently I've been really sick and just really not into my PhD, and I guess you could say I kind of just fell out of love with the project, and I'll kind of explain a little bit why. I think it's just because a lot of people around me, including my advisory team, don't really understand the approach I'm taking to my research, because it is a little bit different and a little bit out there, and I guess it's just been really challenging and really difficult, and because of the health problems that I've had, I really just kind of haven't been particularly motivated. And I had 2 weeks off recently, and I was out of action for those whole 2 weeks, and I didn't get out of bed, and the only thing that kind of kept me going and got me remotivated for doing my research in a way that I haven't really felt since maybe a year ago was starting a art journal about my research. And I'm going to kind of share that with you guys in this series so that you can kind of learn about my research, and I can kind of just document this journey, because communication for social change is a very kind of new field, and it relates to a lot of the work I do, and I think it's just something that I hope will interest a lot of people, particularly those who are kind of interested in working in the social change space. The theoretical framework underpinning my entire project is critical realism, a realist ontology combined with a relativist epistemology. Critical realism contrasts with the two dominant views used in the sciences and the social sciences: positivism, which asserts that our knowledge can only come from observation or experience, and therefore there is no reality beyond what we can know; and interpretivism, the predominant view in the humanities and some social sciences, that our knowledge of the world is filtered through the lens of our subjective, independent experience, and so reality is a socially constructed experience. What sets critical realism apart is that it doesn't reduce ontology, which is how we understand reality, to epistemology, which is what we can know and how we can validate knowledge. Critical realism has a stratified 3-level ontology, which I like to visualize as an iceberg. The first level is the empirical. This is where any phenomena that we can observe or experience sits. The sort of stuff that a lot of positivists or interpretivist research can provide us with. In the context of social change, I like to think of this as the what is happening. What changes can we see? The second domain is the actual, which is where any events or changes that can be observed or unobserved are generated. I think of this as the how are the events at the empirical level occurring. The third domain is the real, which is where generative mechanisms exist. Basically, these are the root phenomena with causal powers and liabilities. I think of these as the why are these things happening. Critical realist research seeks to really drill down to this ontological core of why change exists in a certain context. The challenge is that we can never really know or understand this domain, but extensive research can allow us to make abstractions, and we can use retroductive reasoning to postulate. One of the challenges of critical realism, though, is that as a methodology, it is notoriously difficult to operationalize. Fortunately, somewhat by chance, I'd been exploring a set of methods and tools known as systems thinking in my own work across the social change space right before I commenced my PhD. I was quite shocked at how profound it was that systems thinking and critical realism are so fundamentally similar, yet no known research has explicitly combined the two. and thus my research is guided by an overarching methodological focused research question, which will contribute greatly to ICT for D theory and research. What contributions can critical systems thinking methods bring to research about social change carried out under a critical realist paradigm? So even though in terms of my data collection and things like that, I'm quite behind on my research project, the one thing that I have been able to achieve, and I'm quite proud of it, is with this first research question that I've basically been able to more or less prove my hypothesis was correct. The tools and methods of critical systems thinking can not only assist researchers trying to carry out research under the critical realist paradigm, but you can actually kind of take a full application of both of these and you can really apply systems thinking as a methodology for critical realist research, not just kind of, I guess, like a fragmented application of the two. Initially, I thought that kind of at a bare minimum, you'd be able to take a little bit from critical realism, a little bit from systems thinking, and kind of use these two things to do research in a new and innovative way. But what I've found is you can kind of do a full application of both of these things, which I believe is going to be hopefully a bit of a game changer in the way social researchers research social change. And I have developed a framework for doing this, and I have had a paper that has been conditionally approved for kind of the leading journal in critical realism, but I do have to make some pretty significant changes to that. But it's okay, I think I still have like a month to do that. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. That's probably my biggest research win so far. So you might be wondering whether research like this that is quite theory heavy and so focused on the use of the critical realist framework and also systems thinking tools and methods, what kind of practical implications does research like this have for the world and for social change, and beyond, I guess, these kind of new ways of making sense of and understanding social change. I'm hoping that because of this approach that I'm taking, it will be able to provide actors within the development or social change space new ways of kind of understanding the impact that they're having, understanding the context that they're working in, and the ways that their actions do or do not promote social change. So in order to do this, I am partnering with an organisation based in India. So I am doing my PhD with two universities. It's a joint research institute of the University of Queensland here in Australia and the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. So through their joint research academy, that's why I've got a supervisor in each country. I get to kind of go between. If COVID wasn't a thing, I would have already been in India by now. I would have been doing at least 1/3 of my PhD over there. But yeah, I'm partnering with an organisation. It's a social tech company that started at IIT Delhi, and the work that they're doing is incredible. I'll definitely talk about it in more detail later. But basically what my research will be focusing on, the kind of field focused research question is kind of broadly looking at how through this critical realist approach different, I guess, social or structural or cultural factors influence the ability of ICT to promote some sort of change. So within the development space, and particularly in ICT for D, there's always kind of been this assumption that there's very linear cause and effect patterns when it comes to the implementation of some kind of technology or a technologically mediated approach, and the outcomes that you see, the development, the change, the accumulation of wealth, the accumulation of health or financial assets, things like that. And it's kind of very naive and also very wrong to just assume that it's the technology alone that has led to these sorts of outcomes. Of course, it's really difficult to measure what other factors have kind of contributed to this, and that's where the critical realist approach hopefully kind of steps in and allows us to understand this a little bit better. And the field-specific research question that I have is basically looking at how different structural, cultural, external conditions have enabled these two particular case studies with the organisation that I'm working with to be so successful in these two very different contexts within India. So I'm super excited to be going to India. I love India. It's one of my favourite countries I've travelled to. Part of the reason I was so drawn to this PhD program was the fact that it's with the two universities, and ever since my first trip to India there's always been a big part of me that's wanted to go back and live there. So I'm excited that even though I can't stay there long term like I originally thought, I still get to go over there to do my field work. So yeah, that's an overview of kind of my research, where it sits within the field of communication for social change, where I'm kind of at in my PhD journey. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit of a different kind of video for me, but I think it's really fun to kind of use this very tangible, physical journal that I'm kind of creating to get me through this PhD, kind of using that as a tool for storytelling here on my YouTube channel.